The gravy boat was still warm when he said it. "You're a burden. Get out of my house." For a moment, the world just stopped. The soft hum of Christmas carols from the Google Nest froze mid-note. The scent of cinnamon and ham hung heavy, and every eye at the table locked on me like I'd just ruined their perfect Hallmark dinner. 12 people, neighbors, business partners, church friends, watching in silence as my father made me the evening's entertainment. He sat there, the self-crowned king of our suburban kingdom, chin raised, eyes full of righteous disgust like he was cutting cancer out of his life. His hand rested on the polished oak table that Mom once saved for 3 months to buy. Her chair, still sitting across from him, was empty. She'd been gone for years, but her ghost seemed to hover in the hollow between us. I didn't argue. You don't argue with Christopher Harlow, not in public, not if you've learned what happens when you do. I just stood, my pulse pounding behind my eyes. The room tilted between humiliation and disbelief. He wanted me to break, to beg, to give him one more scene to remind everyone how pathetic his son was. Instead, I stayed quiet. My throat burned like I'd swallowed glass. Paula, my stepmother, polished and practiced, rested a manicured hand on his wrist as if calming a dog that had done a good trick. "Chris, honey," she whispered sweetly, "not tonight." But he smirked, eyes locked on me. "No, Paula, tonight's perfect." My brother Nate couldn't even meet my gaze. His fork just kept stabbing the same piece of turkey over and over, as if maybe he could cut his guilt small enough to swallow. My duffel bag was already packed by the door. That's what hit hardest. He'd planned this. My father didn't make spontaneous gestures. Every cruelty was scheduled, every humiliation choreographed. He kicked the duffel toward me with his foot, and the sound of it sliding across the hardwood floor was louder than any shout. "Merry Christmas," he said, and laughter rolled through the room. Thin, nervous, obedient laughter from guests who'd do anything to stay on his good side. Outside, the cold punched me in the chest. The porch lights blinked red and blue, cheap LEDs from a Black Friday sale he bragged about for weeks. The wind cut across my face, sharp and merciless, but the silence that followed was almost peaceful. Inside, laughter returned, muffled through the walls like I was already erased. I walked down the driveway, boots crunching through snow, and reached for my phone, ready to call anyone, no one, but then it vibrated in my hand. A voicemail transcription appeared from an unknown number. Time-stamped 5 minutes ago, after dinner. 9 p.m., torch the papers. Use the alley. No mistakes this time, I froze. My breath fogged in front of me, hanging like a question. Torch what papers? Who was this meant for? I replayed the message twice. The voice was distorted, rushed, but I'd swear it was familiar. My father's laugh echoed faintly through the window behind me, and something in my gut twisted. He'd been hiding something. Something big. Instinctively, I opened the tile tracker app on my phone. My keychain had one, a gift from Nate last year after I kept losing my keys. It pinged immediately, but then so did another tracker. Another device paired to the same family account. My father's. 2 blue dots blinked on the map. One, mine, stationary on the sidewalk. The other, his, moving slowly east past the gas station toward the Riverbend Industrial Storage Units. The timestamp read 8:36 p.m. He was on his way somewhere. And at 9 p.m., the time from the voicemail, he'd be there. Burning something, I should have walked away. Should have let him rot in whatever mess he'd built. But curiosity and anger have the same temperature. They burn hot and fast. If he wanted me out of his house, fine. But he wasn't taking my peace, my inheritance, or my mother's memory with him. I pulled my coat tighter, thumbed the cracked face of Grandma's old Timex, one of the only things I still owned that felt like family, and started walking toward the bus stop. The night around me was a mix of sharp wind, holiday lights, and regret. Every house on our street glowed with warmth, families laughing, clinking glasses, kids tearing wrapping paper. But mine was the kind of house where love came with an invoice. The kind where Merry Christmas sounded like a threat. The bus arrived in a hiss of cold air and diesel. The driver, an old man in a Santa hat, gave me a nod, the kind that says, "I don't know your story, but I've seen 1,000 like it." I sat near the back, watching snow slide down the window as the city blurred by. Each streetlight flickered across my reflection, carving me into fragments. The dutiful son, the disappointment, the detective. The tile app updated again. The second dot had stopped moving. Unit Form B, my hands trembled, but not from the cold anymore. The voicemail said torch the papers. The location matched Dad's route. And my instincts whispered what my brain refused to say out loud. He was covering his tracks. By the time the bus hissed to a stop near Riverbend, the streets were empty. Industrial warehouses stood like sleeping giants, their corrugated sides glinting under orange sodium lights. The snow here wasn't soft, it was crusted, dirty, hardened by years of neglect. I followed the map on my phone through the chain link maze until I saw it, a storage unit with faint light bleeding from beneath the door. Number 14B, the air smelled of gasoline. My heart thudded in my throat. I crept closer, boots silent on the icy ground, and reached out to touch the metal handle. It was warm, not from the heater, from fire. "Merry Christmas, Dad," I whispered, pulling my phone out and hitting record. Behind the door, something moved, a shadow, a voice. Then the unmistakable sound of a lighter flicking open, and that's when I realized, whatever my father was about to burn, it wasn't just papers. It was my life. The corrugated metal door groaned like a wounded animal as I pressed my hand against it. The chill of the steel stung my fingertips, except for one patch, hot to the touch, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. Someone had been here recently. The padlock dangled loose, half sawn through, its edges bright silver against the dull rust. My stomach coiled tight. Dad was never careless. If he left this like that, it meant he expected to come back soon. I crouched low, fingers trembling as I lifted the door just an inch. A hiss of warm, smoky air slid out, wrapping around me with the thick scent of paper, gasoline, and something sharply chemical, pine cleaner, or maybe guilt pretending to be cleanliness. Inside, light flickered weakly from a single hanging bulb, swinging from its wire like a heartbeat on a thread. Rows of banker boxes filled the space, neatly labeled in my father's perfect black. Sharpie handwriting, Veterans Hearth. Taxes 2019, donations. Estate. Private. It looked less like a storage unit and more like a crime scene frozen mid-breath. In the far corner, a small fire safe sat cracked open, its latch bent into a crooked smile. Papers spilled out like intestines, bills, receipts, forms stamped in red. And right on top of that mess lay something I hadn't seen in years. A dark brown leather folder with gold-pressed initials, R.H. Grandma's. The same folder Dad had snatched from her attorney's hands after her funeral, saying it was just personal correspondence. I remember the way the lawyer's face fell when he realized it was gone. My hands shook as I flipped it open. Inside, Riverview Community Trust, beneficiary, me, distribution at age 21 or upon contingency triggers. I frowned, eyes racing to the fine print. Contingency triggers, demonstrated fraud, abuse or misappropriation by guardian. My chest hollowed out. The air seemed to drain from the room. Grandma hadn't trusted him. She knew. She'd built a trap into the will, a trigger that would pass everything to me if Dad ever got caught doing what I was staring at right now. Attached were photocopies of cashier's checks. Donor names I recognized. Neighbors, my high school teacher, church members, lined up beside large donations to Veterans Hearth, the charity Dad founded to help wounded soldiers transition to civilian life. But the endorsements told a different story. Each check had been cashed by Christopher Harlow himself at a grimy check-cashing place downtown. The handwriting was his, the signature his. Next to the ledgers were handwritten notes. Wheelchairs, 8X delivered Jan, but I knew there were no wheelchairs. Just burned paper trails and Dad's smile at church fundraisers. My throat went dry. My father, the suburban saint, was a thief, and Grandma knew it. Then, footsteps. I froze, blood hammering in my ears. I slipped behind a stack of boxes, crouching low, phone flashlight off, breathing through my sleeve. The storage door creaked upward another foot. Boots crunched on salt outside. Then, a voice. Low, nervous, and painfully familiar. "Yeah, I'm here," Nate whispered, the glow of his phone lighting half his face. "He hasn't shown yet. Dad, relax." We torch it, we bail. Paula's watching the house. I stepped out from behind the boxes. "Hey, little brother." His phone hit the floor. He spun around, eyes wide. For a split second, he looked 10 again. Freckles, wide eyes, scraped elbows. Then the fear twisted into resentment. "You shouldn't be here. Neither should you. I gestured to the boxes. Or these. Stolen donations, Nate. Grandma's trust. You both knew. He didn't deny it. His lips tightened. He said we'd fix it before taxes. He said it was temporary. Temporary? I picked up one of the folders, the weight of it sick in my hands. You're laundering charity money. This isn't temporary, it's federal. He looked away, swallowing hard. You think you're the hero, don't you? You always were. Perfect son, perfect victim. You don't get it. He promised me college, the house, everything. I didn't have a choice. You had a choice, I said softly. And you picked the wrong side. Something metallic clicked behind him. The sound of a car door outside, then boots on gravel. The tile app on my phone blinked again. Dad's dot was moving closer. Nate rubbed his palms together, pacing. You need to go. You don't know what you're in the middle of. I reached into the fire safe and grabbed the SD card case labeled Ring Cam, Backyard, along with Grandma's original will and a handful of prepaid Visa cards. Oh, I think I do. Don't, Nate warned, his voice breaking. If you take those, he'll kill you. I stared at him. Then he'll have to try. A siren wailed faintly in the distance, echoing off the metal walls. Maybe an ambulance, maybe karma. The smell of gasoline grew sharper, thicker, almost alive. Nate's voice softened like something inside him cracked. You don't get it, he whispered. You were always the favorite. Mom, Grandma, everyone loved you. He hated that. He used me because I was disposable, I blinked. He used both of us. Nate's jaw trembled. He pointed at the boxes. He's going to blame you. Tomorrow, Paul is filing a restraining order. He already told everyone you're unstable. Said you hacked his charity accounts. Said he's evicting you retroactively. He changed the locks tonight. The words hit like bricks. He'd planned everything, the eviction, the public scene, even my reputation. He wanted me erased before I could speak. The LED on my phone flashed again. The second dot, the one marked Dad's tile, was right outside the gate. My breath hitched. Nate, I said quietly, you have one chance to make this right. Pick a side. His eyes darted toward the door. His lips trembled. I already did. The metal door groaned, rising inch by inch. A shadow filled the entrance. The smell of gasoline hit first, raw, stinging, unmistakable. Then came the jerry can, and the lighter, already sparking between my father's fingers. Family meeting, he said, stepping into the light. Let's clean up a little mess before Christmas morning. And in that second, I realized the fire wasn't meant to destroy evidence. It was meant to destroy me. He drew the flame through the air like a signature. The tiny firelight danced across his face, carving shadows deep into his smirk. Look who can't take a hint, he said, voice cold and sharp as the metal shelves behind him. The lighter clicked open and shut, a steady rhythm, a metronome for bad decisions. Gasoline fumes choked the air, crawling into my lungs like poison. My father stood in the doorway, jerry can in one hand, lighter in the other, ready to erase the truth one spark at a time. Charity fraud? Forged signatures? Grandma's trust? My voice trembled, but the anger underneath was molten. You torched my future, and now you're going to torch the evidence too? He laughed softly, stepping closer. Evidence? He tilted his head, eyes glinting with amusement. That's your handwriting on most of those documents, son. Your name, your social, your email logins. You were always careless. You gave me everything I needed to make it look clean. For a second, the world tilted. I stared at him, the words echoing like gunshots in my head. He'd used me, my identity, my records, my digital trail. Identity theft, I whispered, realizing what he'd done. The phrase felt strange in my mouth, like learning a new language for betrayal. He shrugged. Call it whatever you want. But when this all burns, the only name left in those ashes will be yours. He raised the jerry can, pouring a thin line of gasoline across the concrete floor. The fumes thickened, the slick trail shimmering in the flickering light. Then he turned to Nate. Help me, now. Nate didn't move. He stood frozen, eyes darting between us like a child trapped between fire and storm. Dad, this isn't now, he barked, voice snapping like a whip. But Nate stayed still. Something had cracked inside him, some final thread of obedience gone slack. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the small stack of SD cards I'd taken from the fire safe earlier. Ring camera, I said. Kitchen, office, garage. 6 months of footage. Want to bet no one sees this tonight? For the first time, doubt flickered in his eyes. Just for a heartbeat, but I saw it. Then fury drowned it out. He lunged. The lighter flared. I reacted on instinct, throwing the SD cases at his chest like shrapnel. They hit him, plastic cracking against his jacket. He stumbled, the lighter slipping from his hand and skittering under a shelf. Time slowed. I saw the faint spark, the way the gasoline trail glimmered as the flame kissed it. A hiss, then a pop, and the world ignited. Orange fire bloomed across the boxes labeled tax. The heat slapped my face, searing the air. Nate swore, grabbing a wool blanket from the corner and smothering the growing flames with frantic, desperate movements. Dad kicked at him, shouting, "Move! Move!" But Nate kept going, coughing through the smoke. I grabbed the leather folder, the one with Grandma's will, and shoved it into my backpack. "Run!" I shouted, grabbing Nate's arm. He hesitated, then followed. We sprinted toward the door as smoke clawed at our throats. Behind us, Dad yelled something I couldn't make out, something drowned in the roar of fire. Outside, the freezing air hit like a slap. I collapsed against the chain-link fence, gulping oxygen that tasted like metal. Nate bent over, coughing so hard I thought he'd fall. Behind us, the orange light flickered, licking the edges of the door. A sprinkler system sputtered weakly to life, the old pipes coughing water in uneven spurts. Somewhere a siren wailed, distant but growing closer. "He'll say we did it," Nate rasped, voice hoarse. "He'll blame us." "He can try," I said, my hands shaking as I pulled out my phone. My mind was burning hotter than the fire behind us. "Grandma's will names me as the heir. The county recorder's office has the original document. And these," I held up my phone, "are uploading right now to a private drive." "Uploading what?" he asked. "Photos, scans, every page of that folder, every ledger I could grab, and—" I paused, a small reckless grin tugging at my mouth. "I posted on Reddit," Nate blinked. "You what?" "I posted on R True Off My Chest 2 nights ago. My dad started a fake veterans charity. He called me a burden at Christmas. Do I expose him or keep quiet? Someone DM'd me, an attorney from Chicago. She said she's seen cases like this. Told me exactly where to look and who to contact. She's already talking to the DA's office." Nate stared at me, pale and silent. The sirens were closer now, bouncing off the warehouses like thunder. "So, what now?" "Now," I said, standing, "we finish what Grandma started." By morning, the world had changed. The police declared the fire an accidental electrical fault. Dad, of course, made sure the narrative spread fast. But I had proof. The attorney, Mara Caldwell, called before noon. Her voice was brisk, confident, the kind that didn't flinch. "Your father's been laundering charity donations for years," she said. "We can't prosecute yet, but we can expose him. We need one more piece. Evidence he forged a power of attorney when you were 14. It'll prove he used your name legally to move assets." I hung up and looked at Nate, who sat slumped in the corner booth of a diner, stirring cold coffee. "You know anything about that?" He hesitated, then nodded. "The notary who stamped that form, she lives across the street. HOA president. She's scared of Dad. But she hates fraud more." We spent the rest of the afternoon walking back through our perfect little neighborhood, the one with the Christmas wreaths and cookie-cutter smiles. Every step felt like walking through a stage set, the fake snow and painted happiness cracking underfoot. When we reached the house, a new keypad blinked red on the door. Dad had already changed the locks, but then I noticed the doorbell camera, the one I'd installed, the one tied to my account. It was still online, still recording. I smiled at its little glass eye. "Smile for the camera, Dad," I murmured. "We're going live tonight." The sun sank behind the rooftops, painting the street in gold and fire. I could already see the ending forming in my head, the only kind of justice he'd understand. At 7 p.m., I texted every neighbor. "Forgiveness toast tonight at the Harlows. Bring wine. It's time for the truth." And when the first car pulled up, I saw the reflection of red and blue lights parking 2 houses down. The sheriff had arrived, the stage was set. And this time, the fire wasn't mine to put out. The house glowed like a Christmas postcard. Candles lit, garlands hung, wine glasses lined like soldiers. But beneath it all, the air was electric with something dark and waiting. Paula had laid out a perfect charcuterie board, hands trembling as she smoothed the cheese slices like her life depended on it. Dad, ever the showman, stood in front of the fireplace in his best gray sweater, the kind he wore for church and press photos. His grin looked polished, but his eyes were calculating, flicking toward the door every few seconds. He knew something was coming. He just didn't know what. Neighbors began arriving one by one, smiling uncertainly as they stepped inside. These were the same people who'd clapped for him at the Veterans Hearth charity dinners, who'd bought raffle tickets and donated cash for the cause, the same people he'd stolen from. Now they stood in his living room, holding wine bottles and curiosity. I stood near the mantel, right where Mom's stocking used to hang before she left. The smell of cinnamon candles couldn't hide the stench of fear. I raised my glass. "Before we toast," I said, my voice steady. "A story." The room quieted instantly. Even the background Christmas playlist faded out as if the house itself was listening. I looked toward the sheriff's cruiser parked discreetly 2 houses down, its headlights off but engine idling. Then I picked up the TV remote and pressed play. The flat screen flickered to life, showing grainy footage from October. Dad in the garage, feeding receipts into a shredder. The mic picked up Paula's voice off screen. "They'll never find it," Dad laughed. "They won't even look." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Cut to another clip. November. Dad in the backyard, stuffing envelopes full of cash into the trunk of his car. Then December. Him sitting at his desk, tracing my signature over legal documents, blowing on the ink, and smiling at the shape of the forged R. Paula's hand flew to her mouth. A neighbor dropped his glass, red wine splattering across the rug. The HOA president, a woman who'd lived across the street for 20 years, leaned forward and squinted at the next slide. It showed a notarized power of attorney from 2014. Her face went pale. "That's my notary stamp," she said. "Except I never signed that." "He brought me a copy already stamped." Dad's jaw clenched, but he barked a forced laugh. "Deepfakes," he said, waving a dismissive hand. "You people believe everything you see online. My son's been doctoring this stuff for months." I hit the next slide. Bank stills. Donation ledgers. Screenshots of emails between him and his accountant, shifting donations into shell accounts. Then the county recorder's official copy, the real one, obtained just hours earlier by my attorney Mara Caldwell. The document proved there was no power of attorney filed in 2014. The version Dad had been using was printed at home. Paula's lip trembled. "Chris," she whispered, "tell them this isn't true." Dad went for his last card. He puffed out his chest, turned to the crowd, and pointed at me. "My son has always had problems," he said, his voice dripping with false pity. "He's addicted to attention. He stole from me, forged these documents, and now he's trying to destroy his own family because he can't stand being left out." Ask Nate, all eyes turned to my brother. He looked smaller than I'd ever seen him, hunched shoulders, red eyes, guilt carving shadows into his face. He hesitated. Then he said, voice shaking but loud enough for everyone to hear, "He's lying. I helped him. Our dad steal. Because I was afraid of him." The room imploded into silence. You could hear the hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Paula sank into a chair, face buried in her hands. A neighbor whispered, "Oh my God." I nodded to the sheriff, who'd been standing quietly by the doorway, listening. He stepped forward, badge glinting. "Mr. Harlow," he said calmly, "we're going to need you to come with us to answer some questions about misuse of charitable funds." Dad's mask cracked. His face twisted with rage as he pointed at me. "You ungrateful waste," he spat. "You were a burden the day your mother left?" I cut in. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A new message. A DM notification from a username that froze my blood cold. Mary Widow 921. The message read, "I didn't leave." I looked toward the front door. And there she was, older, softer, but unmistakably my mother. The woman whose absence had haunted every Christmas, every dinner, every fight. Tears welled in her eyes as she stepped forward. "I didn't leave you, sweetheart," her voice cracked. "He made it look that way." The HOA president whispered, "He forged the paperwork, didn't he? Said she was unstable. Filed for full custody." Mom nodded slowly, her gaze locked on Dad. "He told the court I was violent, that I abandoned you, but I never stopped looking." The room tilted. Dad took a step back, his confidence unraveling. The TV screen behind him froze on the image of him holding the lighter in the storage unit, the moment I caught him red-handed. The sheriff moved closer, pulling out a pair of cuffs. Dad turned toward the door like a cornered animal. "You don't know what you're doing!" he shouted. Wait, I said quietly. I walked to the mantel and set down an envelope, crisp and white, with the logo of a genetics lab printed on it. The weight of it felt like finality. Before anyone moves, I said, there's one more truth. I looked at Dad, at Mom, at Nate, at the hollow family portrait that had been my life. My hand trembled as I slid Grandma's old house key under the flap and tore it open. The paper inside crackled softly as I unfolded it. The words swam before my eyes, black ink on white paper, too heavy to breathe around. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. My voice broke on the last word. The room gasped. Someone dropped a glass. Paula whispered, "What?" I looked up at Dad. No, at the man who'd raised me out of convenience. Not love, Royden said the words that shattered the house in half. "You're not my father." And the last line of the report named who was. Michael Harlow, my uncle. Dad's brother. The man who died 15 years ago on a worksite accident. The room went silent except for the sound of my father's breath. Ragged, furious, terrified. Mom's tears hit the floor like tiny ticking clocks. And somewhere outside, the sheriff's radio crackled with new orders. Justice wasn't coming. It was already here. Probability of paternity, 0.00%. The words hit like a sledgehammer, sharp, final, undeniable. The air in the living room vanished, replaced by the stunned silence of 100 unspoken memories, rearranging themselves into something darker. Paula's hand slipped from her glass, red wine bleeding across the carpet like a wound. Nate leaned into the wall, his eyes searching the floor as if he might find an answer there. The sheriff didn't move, but I saw the shift in his face, curiosity hardening into calculation. The paper shook in my hand. "There's more," I said, my voice smaller than I wanted. My throat was raw, but I kept going. "The DNA matches, not to a stranger." I turned the page, every movement echoing like a drumbeat in that suffocating quiet. "It matches Michael Harlow, Dad's older brother." The gasp that rippled through the crowd was almost physical. My mother's eyes closed, and her body seemed to fold in on itself. She whispered, "Michael," like it was a prayer she hadn't dared to say out loud for 15 years. Dad, or whatever he was now, took a step back, color draining from his face. For once, the smug mask cracked. "That's impossible," he said, but it sounded more like a plea than a protest. Mom's voice trembled, but it carried the weight of years of silence. "Michael loved us," she said softly. "He wanted to leave the company, leave you and start over with me. You were 1 year old." Her hands twisted in front of her like she was wringing the past dry. When Chris found out, he filed emergency custody papers, told everyone I was unstable, and a week later, Michael died on that worksite accident. Her eyes lifted, and for the first time, she met his without fear. I stopped believing in accidents that year. The room turned glacial. Every Christmas light seemed too bright, too cruel. Dad's breathing grew jagged, his eyes darting between the sheriff, the crowd, and me. "You think this means anything?" he hissed. "You can't prove—" "I can," I said, placing Grandma's old trust binder on the mantel beside the DNA report. Because Grandma knew. I flipped to the final page, the one I'd read so many times the paper had gone soft at the corners. She couldn't prove it when Michael died, but she knew what kind of man you were. So she added a clause. I read it aloud, voice steady now. "If proof ever emerges that Christopher Harlow is not the biological father of my grandson, and he has committed fraud, misappropriation, or abuse against him, all property and assets within the Riverview Community Trust transfer immediately to my grandson. Any rights of occupancy or claim by Christopher Harlow are revoked effective immediately." For a heartbeat, no one spoke. Then the HOA president, the same neighbor who'd notarized the document years ago, stepped forward, her expression stone hard. "I remember this," she said, flipping to the back. Her eyes found her own stamp, her signature. She made me notarize it in my kitchen. She said it made her sleep better. Dad lunged forward, roaring, but the sheriff was faster. Metal cuffs snapped shut with a clean, echoing click. The sound filled the room like thunder. Neighbors flinched backward, their collective gasp rising like wind before a storm. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, covering everything, even sins, in temporary purity. "Listen to me," he shouted as the sheriff pulled him toward the door, his face twisted with fury, spit flying. "You think you won? The IRS, the Attorney General, the courts, they'll chew you up, boy. You don't even know how to keep a house. You're a burden? I cut in, stepping forward until my breath clouded his. You've called me that my whole life, but you're the one who fed off this family like a parasite. You taught me everything I needed to know, how to survive lies, how to carry pain I didn't ask for. He gave one last brittle laugh, his voice cracking on the way out. You're nobody. Maybe, I said quietly, but I'm the deed holder now. The sheriff guided him out into the night. The flash of red and blue lights bled through the windows, painting the snow in restless color. As the cruiser door slammed shut, something inside me loosened. Not joy, not revenge, just release. Neighbors murmured, voices trembling. Paula sat slumped on the couch, her mascara running like confession. Nate wiped his face with his sleeve, tears he didn't even try to hide. And Mom reached for me. For the first time in 15 years, I didn't flinch. We fell into each other's arms, two ghosts finally coming home. Later, when the house emptied, silence settled like dust after a storm. I walked down the hall slowly, tracing my hand over the baseboards Dad always bragged about installing. The wood felt cold. I stopped outside a small pink door, my half-sister's room. I'd almost forgotten she existed in all this chaos, a quiet little shadow in a house full of noise. I knocked softly. The door cracked open. Her face peeked out, eyes wide, cheeks tear-streaked. She must have been hiding the whole time, listening. Is he gone? She whispered. Yeah, I said. He's gone. She hesitated, then stepped forward. Was it my fault? I knelt on the carpet so we were eye level. My throat tightened, but I smiled. No, none of this was you. You're not a burden. You're a miracle, she smiled through tears. Small, shy, fragile, and nodded like she'd been waiting her whole life to hear that. By midnight, the house was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock in the hallway. I sat by the bay window, laptop open, typing out the final post. Update, he's been arrested. The clause activated. The truth is out. I attached photos of the documents, redacted faces, timestamps, proof. I didn't add emotion. The facts were enough. The post went viral in minutes. Thousands of comments poured in. Outrage, sympathy, disbelief. But I didn't read them. I didn't need validation. The story wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about balance. Gravity finally finding me. Outside, the snow kept falling, soft and infinite. Inside, the tree lights glowed against the window, turning the glass into a mirror. For the first time, the reflection staring back at me wasn't the broken son who got thrown out of his father's house. It was a man standing inside his own. The house still smelled faintly of smoke, guilt, and cinnamon. But it was mine. The truth was mine. And for the first time, the family left inside, scarred, imperfect, real, finally belonged there.